Hello and welcome back to this video. So here we're going to be looking at solving quadratic equations, particularly by factorising. So this is suitable for foundation and higher tier GCSE Maths students. However, there are a few examples that are higher tier examples only. So those are clearly highlighted. So if you're doing foundation tier, most of these questions are still applicable for you. So the objective here, we are trying to solve quadratic equations by factorising. We're going to solve both monic and non-monic quadratic equations. We're going to use the difference of two squares, and we can also rearrange quadratics to make them equal to 0. So we can only solve quadratic equations if they are equal to 0, so we need to be able to do that. So the definition here, a quadratic equation is an equation where the highest power term is an x squared term. So the method that we use to solve quadratic equations is to first factor out the quadratic into brackets, and then we need to set each bracket equal to 0 to solve. So here's an example. We have x squared plus 8x plus 12 equals 0. So firstly, what we need to do is factorise x squared plus 8x plus 12. So if you're a little bit unsure on factorising quadratics, I have other videos on how to do that. But if you're familiar with that, you should know that to factorise quadratic equations, we need to think of two numbers that multiply to this number and add to this number. So we need to think of two numbers that multiply to make 12 and add to make 8. So if we think of two numbers that multiply to 12 and add to 8, I know that 6 times 2 is 12 and 6 plus 2 is 8. So my two numbers are 6 and 2. So if I factorise this, we have x plus 6 and x plus 2 equals 0. So now I need to solve these. So the method we use to solve these is kind of to do with the fact that if you multiply two numbers to get 0, one of those numbers always has to be 0. So for example, if I have 2 times something equals 0, the only possible number that something could be is 0, okay? So we call that the zero product property. So we have here x plus 6 times x plus 2 equals 0. So for these two brackets to multiply to make 0, at least one of the brackets needs to be equal to 0. So for x plus 2 to be equal to 0, x is equal to minus 2, because minus 2 plus 2 is 0. And for x plus 6 to be equal to 0, x must be equal to minus 6, because minus 6 plus 6 is 0. So for these monic quadratics, when we factorise, all we really have to do is flip the sign, and that is what x is equal to. Okay, so x is minus 6 and x is minus 2. So this question here, so we are again going to factorise this quadratic to make it equal to 0. So you should know that to factorise this, you need to think of two numbers that multiply to make minus 12 and add to the coefficient of x, which in this case is 1. So the two numbers need to multiply to minus 12 and add to 1. So in this case, two numbers that multiply to minus 12 and add to 1, I know that 4 times minus 3 is minus 12, and 4 plus minus 3 is 1. So the two numbers are 4 and minus 3. So putting it into brackets, I have x plus 4 and x minus 3 equals 0. So for this term to be equal to 0, x would need to be equal to minus 4, because minus 4 plus 4 makes 0. And then for this term to be equal to 0, x would need to be 3, because minus 3 plus 3 is 0. So again, all I've literally just done is flip the sign. Plus 4 becomes a minus 4, minus 3 becomes a plus 3. And the two solutions to this equation is x equals minus 4 or x equals 3. So this is an example involving the difference of two squares. So again, I have another video on how to factorise the difference of two squares. But if you are unfamiliar, the difference of two squares, if we have x squared minus a squared, that is always equal to x plus a, x minus a. So because a squared in this case is 36, this is going to factorise to x plus 6, x minus 6. So to make this equal to 0, x would need to be minus 6, and to make this equal to 0, x would need to be 6. So x equals minus 6 or x equals plus 6. So this is a higher tier example. So what makes it a higher tier question is the fact that this particular quadratic equation is non-monic. So the x squared term has a coefficient of 2. So if you're unfamiliar with how to factorise non-monic quadratics, I would recommend having a look at the video on factorising non-monic quadratics. But if you do know how to do this, the method is we first start by multiplying 2 by 3. So 2 times 3 is 6. And then we need to think of two numbers that multiply to 6 and add to the number in the middle, so that's 7. So I know that 6 times 1 is 6 and 6 plus 1 is 7. So now I'm going to write this middle term as 6x plus 1x. So it's 2x squared plus 6x plus 1x plus 3 equals 0. Now I'm going to split it down the middle and factorise both halves. So if I factorise 2x squared plus 6x, it's going to be 2x bracket x plus 3. And then if I factorise 1x plus 3, I'm just going to pull out a factor of 1 and it's going to be x plus 3. So one of the brackets is going to be the x plus 3. And then the other bracket is what's left, which is 2x plus 1. Okay. So this time it's a bit different. So to make this thing equal to 0, x would need to be minus 3. Again, we just flip the sign, so plus 3 becomes a minus 3. But to make this thing equal to 0, we have to consider 2x plus 1 equals 0. So to solve this, you would minus 1, so 2x equals minus 1, and then you would divide by 2, so x equals minus a half. So we have x equals minus 3 and x equals minus a half. So to get this second solution, it's almost like you have to flip the sign and divide it by the coefficient of x, okay? So that's a general rule you can use. So minus the sign or flip the sign. So if it's a minus 1, it becomes a plus 1. If it's a plus 1, it becomes a minus 1. And then divide it by whatever is in front of the x. This one here is a bit different because it's not equal to 0. So the number one rule when you're solving quadratic equations by factorising, they have to be equal to 0. So this thing is not equal to 0, so we need to make it equal to 0. So at the moment it's equal to 21, so to get rid of that 21, we need to minus 21 from both sides. So we end up with x squared plus 4x minus 21 equals 0. This is a regular monic quadratic, so it's quite straightforward to multiply. We just need to think of two numbers that multiply to make minus 21 and add to make 4. So two numbers that multiply to minus 21 and add to 4, we're going to have 7 and minus 3. So it's just going to be x plus 7 and x minus 3 equals 0. So again, to make this equal to 0, x needs to be minus 7, and to make this equal to 0, x would need to be 3. So the two solutions are x equals minus 7 and x equals 3. Here's another higher tier example. So again, it's a non-monic quadratic. So we need to make this thing equal to 0 before we can do anything. So to do that, we're going to minus 8x and also minus 3 from both sides. So we end up with 3x squared minus 8x minus 3 equals 0. So then we are going to multiply the coefficient of x squared with that number on the end. So 3 times minus 3 gives us minus 9. And then we need to think of two numbers that multiply to minus 9 and add to make minus 8. So two numbers that multiply to minus 9 and add to minus 8, we have minus 9 and 1. So we can rewrite this as 3x squared minus 9x plus 1x minus 3. And then I'm going to split it down the middle, so I end up with 3x bracket x minus 3 plus 1 bracket x minus 3 equals 0. And then I'm just going to pull out the x minus 3 as one factor, and then the 3x plus 1 as another factor. Okay, so to make this thing equal to 0, I have x equals 3, and then to make this thing equal to 0, so if 3x plus 1 equals 0, I would need to minus 1 and divide by 3, so x is going to be minus 1 over 3. Okay, so here's an exam style question on solving quadratic equations. So this time we're factorising, but to factorise this one, we can just pull out a factor of 4x. So we end up with 4x bracket x minus 3 equals 0. Okay, so that one's rather straightforward to factorise. So to make this thing equal to 0, x would need to be equal to 3. So that's one solution. To make this thing equal 0, so if 4 times x is 0, then x would need to be 0. So my other solution is x equals 0. So here's a couple of quick fire practice questions on this topic. So pause the video for a moment if you want to have a go at these, and I'll reveal the answers in a couple of moments. Okay, so here are the answers. Well done if you had a go at those, and well done if you got them all correct. If you're still a little bit unsure, then I would encourage you to maybe go back and look at the video again at some of the ones you were unsure of. But that's everything for this video. So next time we're going to be looking at the quadratic formula. So yeah, I'll see you again in another video. Thank you so much for watching.